Hi, you guys. Was that a little bit loud? I'm not used to speaking not in a virtual screen, so this is a very new experience. But really excited to be here, you guys, and I hope you are feeling the energy at Expo like I am. It's so nice to be in person, isn't it? Really, really nice to be in person after 2+ years. And for those who I haven't gotten a chance to meet, my name is Priscilla Z, and I have the pleasure and the honor of hosting this panel with these awesome people next to me. Very excited to be here and to talk about this topic of really building brands with purpose at scale. So really excited to do that today. And I am a longtime General Mills employee. I will not tell you how many years it is because it's embarrassingly long. But what I will say is I've been working on our natural organic brands for the past 4.5 years. And actually my husband, who's in the audience, I actually raised my hand as soon as General Mills acquired Annie's. And I was like, I want to work on the Annie's brand. And sure enough, my husband got to work on it 2 to 3 years before me. Not that I hold that against him at all. But we definitely, I love the Annie's brand. I actually got my dream come true because I had put on my development plan, I really want to work on Annie's, learn more about Annie's. And sure enough, I was sitting in John Forker's office and got to do a fit interview with him, and 4.5 years ago moved out to Berkeley to work on the brand. So it's been an amazing, amazing journey. One of the things that I want to talk about today, though, too, and what I told the panelists as we were prepping for this, is I don't want it to be a commercial. And I want to talk about both the positives about building a brand at scale, but also some of the tough things, too. And so really hold these guys to it, to be vulnerable and candid as we talk through some of the pluses and minuses and challenges that we've faced for sure. So really proud that General Mills is the #1 natural organic food manufacturer. It's pretty amazing. So the 5 of us up here are representing about $1 billion in sales between Annie's, Cascadian Farm, Muir Glen, Larabar, and Epic. It's pretty incredible. So very, very cool journey. And then some of you guys might be familiar with our venture arm as well, 301 Inc. They are a longtime sponsor of the Pitch Slam here at Expo West and have helped incubate brands like Kite Hill that we're really proud of. So really, we're gonna talk more about building brands at purpose, and what I would love to do is just open it up for my panelists to introduce themselves and just tell them a little bit about themselves and what they're excited about to talk about today. Lara, I'll start with you.
I'm Lara American, the founder of Larabar, and I had an inspiration on a hike many years ago. I won't say how many, but I had an inspiration one day and decided to create this company using simple foods, real ingredients that tasted delicious, and that was my original vision. And what I really wanted to do is make sure that this food was available to any and all people. And I'm just so proud to be here many years later with this incredible team of people that work on these brands and keep them evolving. So that's where it all started, on a hike many years ago.
That's awesome.
Hey guys, my name is Sid, and I'm currently the Senior Brand Manager of Larabar and Epic. So obviously it's an honor to lead these brands, and obviously having Lara here is super special. And I worked at General Mills for about 7 years in brand management, and then before that worked for 3 years as a food investor in private equity. So love the opportunity of working across brands that have mission and impact, and I think it's really amazing to get to work across brands at companies that have such great purpose. So really excited to talk to you guys more about the brands that I lead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Margot Conover, and I lead our global water stewardship programs for the corporate global impact team where we work on regenerative agriculture, that often comes to life the most through our brands as they're seeking to work more closely with awesome farmers and with different suppliers and nonprofits around the world as we source our products. And I just love farms so much. So I feel very excited to share about how purpose can come to life through that, and how through those partnerships and collaborations we can really heal our relationship with the earth, make awesome climate impact, and just be partners in doing this good work. So that's what I'm excited to talk about today.
Hey everybody, my name is Nate Powell-Palm and I'm a certified organic farmer in Montana. And I got hooked up with these fine folks at General Mills when we were having this discussion about what do farmers need to really make a complete ecosystem on their farm? And what other crops do you need folks to buy in order to be able to grow your own fertilizer, realize ecosystem services, and ultimately have a really robust and resilient farm? And so the regenerative Annie's mac and cheese came from that conversation. So really excited to talk about that today.
Love that. So Lara, I would love to start my first question with you. Can you tell us a little bit more? You said Larabar was really founded on a hike, but can you tell us a little bit more about that journey and what the purpose and the foundation of that initial founding was all about?
Well, I developed a passion for natural foods because I realized, first of all, how much better you felt when you ate well. And also, many people don't know this, but when I was in high school, I used to be a junk food kid, so I really loved the bad stuff. And then as I matured and grew, I realized eating better food makes you feel better. So that was always my vision with Larabar, is to take these simple, real ingredients, but make them taste indulgent and delicious, like you should not be eating them. So when I came up with the idea for Larabar, after this hike that one day where I had the inspiration, I got out what I would do is I'd comb the grocery stores and I would look for flavor ideas through pies and cookies and cakes. And then I would emulate them using just unsweetened fruit and nuts. That's what I would do. And I would do things like I'd create cherry pie and cashew cookie and banana bread, things that people love. And then I would go to my friends' businesses on their lunch hour, and I created what, at the time, I had no idea what a focus group meant. And I was creating mini focus groups, and I would ask people, why do they eat bars? What do they like? What don't they like? And what was really interesting at the time is that people would eat nutrition bars, and this is like, we're talking in the year 2000, so it was quite a while ago, and they would feel like they liked the portability and convenience, but they didn't like what they were eating. They didn't like the products offered. And I thought to myself, why can't we have both? Why can't we have something that's really healthy and good for you, but it tastes good and you enjoy it? Because you should enjoy your food. It should be fun to eat. And so that was really my vision. And then I wanted to not make it just for the natural foods folks that understand natural foods, but I wanted to make the flavors appealing to anybody. So I would call like my remote cousins that had zero interest in eating anything of quality, and I would get them to try it and give me feedback. So I was really open to a lot of feedback, thankfully, and that's how I developed all the flavors. It was really, really fun.
That's awesome, Lara. And when you were deciding, I mean, Larabar skyrocketed so quickly, and then when you were deciding who to pick as a partner, how did you choose General Mills and why?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to start my company. I mean, I had the idea in the year 2000. I was a social worker before I got into the natural foods industry. I worked with at-risk kids. So I had a complete life change. But I was really passionate and gritty. So the idea came to me, and then within 3 months I left my job, and Whole Foods opened their first store in Denver, Colorado, where I grew up. And I thought to myself, I'm gonna get a job there and I'm gonna figure out how this business works. And I viewed it as like a paid internship. So I worked on their floor for like 3 years. I learned the ins and outs of the business, and then eventually came to launch. And I was ready to launch, but I knew comparatively, I didn't really know anything about what I was doing. All I knew is I was willing to figure it out, whether it was machinery, shelf life, packaging, distribution, I mean, you name it. And we didn't have any money at the time. I mean, we had no money. I was making $11 an hour working at Whole Foods, just kind of supporting myself. And so friends of mine that worked with me came to me right before I launched and said, I would give you money to invest in the company. I mean, these are friends of mine that aren't savvy investors. So anyway, fast forward. At the time, the reason I think Larabar did really well is the timing was ripe, but also we had something unique and different in the marketplace. You know, it wasn't the same old Me Too product out there. It was, you know, made of fruit, nuts, and spices. You know, at the time, you know, 2 to 9 ingredients. I would do the demos myself. I'd cut up the samples and people would say, well, what's in this? And I'd say cherries, almonds, and dates. I mean, 3 ingredients. What can you say about that? So I think people were so surprised and it was so innovative that it just kind of took off. And within a couple weeks, we were the top 5. So we had 5 flavors that we launched with. We still have them all in our lineup today. And we were the top selling products in Whole Foods in the store I was in over olive oil and water. So I knew we were onto something, but my goal was never to sell my company. I mean, my goal was just literally to start it. And it took 3 years. And then we started on this kind of crazy magic carpet ride. And it wasn't without hiccups, but I'd say a year in after I launched, all these big companies started calling. And I had no idea that was going to happen. I mean, I don't know how naive I was, but all of a sudden we were taking share away and we weren't even buying the data because we couldn't even afford the data. And all these companies started calling. And then eventually I met the General Mills team, and I was really impressed with the soul of the company. I was impressed because the brands that they represent, whether or not you love them or not, they've been around forever. And they're not just churning brands out to churn them out. And I met the people, and they were so genuine. It's a company that celebrates all kinds of, you know, men and women and family and all of that. And I just had such a warm welcome that it was no question when I decided to actually sell the company that's who I was going to sell to, and why I'm sitting here many years later today.
Oh my gosh, Laura, that's so, I said it wasn't going to be a commercial, but that felt like a General Mills commercial. But thank you for sharing that journey with us, Laura, and also the passion and the grit of like $11 an hour. I'm going to learn every part of this business on my own because I really believe in that there's something here. And so, Nate, I know you have that same passion for organic, and so I would love to just hear a little bit more. I mean, you've been an organic inspector, so some people may have seen you on the other side of things, right? And so now you're an organic and regenerative farmer. Like, how do you approach that, and like, how do you think about your passion and how it comes through in your work?
So when I told my parents that I really wanted to be a farmer, and I don't come from farmers, so I had to start from scratch. And there was a big, you know, really honest discussion about love the passion, but how are you going to make a living at it? And so I was given the opportunity to come up in 4-H and learn about production agriculture, learn how to raise a steer, how to grow some crops, about seed. But ultimately, I needed to find some alternative to the mainstream conventional ag model that would make it so that I could have a real chance at a career in agriculture. And that's where I discovered organic. And it was through this long series of mentors who understood that organics is a different deal. It's a different deal for farmers. It's a different take on how we treat the land. And it's ultimately a different relationship between every member of the supply chain. And so when we were looking at what to grow and how to make a business, organics allows you to really say goodbye to the fertilizer salesman, to all of the inputs, to the expensive GMO seed, everything that really keeps farmers on the edge of losing the business every year is not part of organics. Organics is a complete system that by nourishing this ecosystem, we're able to actually realize a future where I, as a first-generation farmer, can become a farmer And I could reasonably expect that this system, organics, is going to be there for my kids when they want to become farmers, if that ever happens. And so in looking at, like, what is the goal for food? What is the goal for rural communities producing this food? And there's a lot of pieces that I think about that just makes sense with organics. And one of those is that we are able to have a closed system. We're able to grow crops that feed each other, and ultimately there's enough left over that we can produce food from it. But we're not extracting, we're not mining our soil, we're not doing things that leaves the environment in worse repair. And I think if I was gonna be anything, I would say I'm someone who would really like on my gravestone to say that I did my best to take care of the land. And organic farming gives us that chance. It really gives us this opportunity to live this lifestyle where we get to be really close to the land, but also steward it to this really incredible degree that I think, when we look around, everybody in this room has some relationship to that understanding that this is a different deal. And we're able to do something that both respects the land, but also takes care of each other. And I think that's where I drive my passion is I love rural America, and organics gives a really fair shake to rural America and can make us whole in a really big way.
That's beautiful, Nate. Thanks for sharing that with us. Sid, you've worked on Larabar and Epic, and Lara was talking about kind of some of the beautiful parts of skyrocketing. Have you ever had an example now that you've kind of taken on these brands at a different part in their life cycle, right? Both the brands combined are like $260 million in sales annually about. Have you had an example where you feel like, gosh, we've strayed away from the purpose? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, you gave me the tough one, PC, but I'll take it. No, it's really interesting. Like General Mills, we acquired such purpose-driven brands, and it's honestly an honor when I hear not only from Lara, but the Epic founders, how important it was that the values aligned. But in companies like General Mills, there will be different people leading brands. Strategies change, but it's always an honor and an opportunity. So I'll talk about Epic. So one thing that's amazing about a brand like Epic is that it has such a clear and bold mission, and it's really rooted in consciously sourced animal protein having power. And we exist to create animal-based products that not only treat those animals well, but improve human health and heal the land. But it's really about the power of consciously sourced animal protein. And that mission, that really bold mission, allowed Epic to not just sell bars, but we also were able to launch pork rinds, launch bone broth, launch animal fats. The mission was so powerful, it allowed us to travel to different categories. And I think that's the power of a bold mission. Like consumers get it. Like we created products from nose to tail. But here's where it gets sometimes challenging. Here's where, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs falter, a lot of emerging brands falter, a lot of companies that buy emerging brands falter, is that we're all innovators at heart. Why these brands succeeded is they innovated. They created a new product. And so sometimes we just love innovation. And we see a new trend and we just want to chase that trend. It's exciting. Our super
There's a lot
fans,
of mushroom jerky out there right now.
but that's who we are as people. And so sometimes and it's so fun to innovate for your super fans because they are the ones engaging on your social media. They're the ones that you meet when you go out. You see these people, they love your brand. But at General Mills, I've learned that to grow a brand from 10 million to 50 million to 100 million, you really have to grow your household penetration. To get that, you have to go from 1% of households in this country to 10%. And so you can't just innovate to follow the trend and delight your fans. You have to innovate to reach more people. And sometimes that's hard, and sometimes that's not fun, and sometimes we forget that. And so I'll rewind the clock 3 years ago on Epic, and we were in the bar category, and at the time, man, there were so many trends. Keto was really emerging as the top trend at the time. There were so many brands stealing market share. And also animal-based ingredients were on trend. So a lot of brands had introduced egg white protein. And if you went to Expo, you saw it everywhere. Collagen was an ingredient that a lot of brands were introducing. And so we were like, what about us? Like, we are a cool, edgy, tip-of-the-spear brand. What are we gonna do? And so the team got together and we were like, you know what? a lot of brands are using egg white protein. What about the egg yolks? Why can't we use that part of the egg in a bar? And so we already sold a bacon bar. So we had this great idea of launching a bacon and egg bar, a breakfast line, and it was a delicious product. Our team, man, it is so delicious. And we debuted it at Expo West. Everybody was excited. So our super fans, they were like, wow, like epic. You guys are so cool, you're at the tip. Retailers were excited about the launch. We were able to get a lot of really great distribution, and it was exciting. And I'll fast forward a year and a half later, and unfortunately, even though it was a great product with a lot of excitement, it didn't last in market. And I think what we learned was that, that innovation wasn't helping Epic reach more people. We were not growing our mission, because to grow your mission, you have to get more people to buy into your mission. And so the people buying that bar already bought Epic. We already have bars a bison bar, a venison bar, a chicken sriracha bar. Like, these are unique flavors and proteins. And so people were just eating our new bacon and egg bar instead of the venison bar. And we weren't doing a good job of bringing new people in. And that was kind of splitting our velocities. And it was also really anchored on one day part in the morning. This was our breakfast bar line. And so it didn't work out. And so, one day, I hope we earned the right to launch that product line again, because it was a delicious and amazing product line. But I think the pivot that we made was, okay, so how do we innovate in a way that's true to your mission, but reach more people? Like, where's the gap? And we looked at our product line and we're like, people love beef jerky, but we don't have a traditional beef jerky flavor. We have a spicy chicken flavor, but what about barbecue chicken? And so I'm really proud that our two most successful bar innovations the last 3 years are beef, salt, and pepper, and barbecue chicken. And it may not sound exciting, but it's helped Epic reach more people, that maybe their gateway is not bison, right? Maybe it's beef. And I'm really proud that it's still 100% grass-fed beef. It's still free-range chicken. We're staying true to our values. There's no compromise on value. So I guess to recap it, it's when you're leading these brands, you got to think about the mission and the purpose. Sometimes we think innovation is our purpose, and I think that should not be true. Like, innovation should be in service of your purpose. And so that was great learning, and I'm really proud of the journey we've been on.
That's great, Sid. Good job on a tough question. Margot, you have such an amazing opportunity to work across brands in your global impact work and really across partners. And so I'm curious if you have an example. I mean, Sid talked about how innovation can't really be the passion, right? You have to stay true to the mission and values. How have you found partners for us to partner on with General Mills? And is there an example that you want to highlight?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think innovation coming to life as a vehicle for your purpose is a really powerful way to think about it. So I love that Sid said that. What's coming to mind for me is Cascadian Farm. And they were just such an innovator back in the 70s. Gene Kahn really innovated about how to change the way that people were farming. He started with blueberries in the Skagit Valley in Washington, where people were like, there is no way you are going to farm a blueberry here without chemicals. It's not happening. It's too humid. There's too many pests. And so we had that innovation in the brand's heritage where they were thinking about how to make farming better, and that's really been a through line through everything that Cascadian Farm has done since then. So one of the things that I'm really excited about, as I mentioned with my passion about climate change, which is something I get to work on a lot in regenerative agriculture, is Kernza. So some of you have heard that. It's been a buzzword at Expo for years now. And for those who don't know, it's a perennial grain that's basically a prairie grass that has been developed to be able to be cultivated for grain for products like you would use for wheat. General Mills, along with a lot of other awesome companies like Patagonia Provisions, have collaborated with the Land Institute and the University of Minnesota to figure out how to grow this plant. It's way different than a traditional annual grain like wheat, which has super stumpy little roots that are only like 6 inches deep, and it has roots that go down 20 feet into the soil. So it's amazingly drought resilient. It's great for the soil. It cultivates healthy microbial communities. And so we've been very excited about this for a long time and its possibility for helping move away from conventional annual crops towards crops that are more friendly to the soil and just help us to, like Nate was saying earlier, be in harmony with that ecosystem and farm in a way that will be durable for many, many generations to come. We've had a lot of challenges with Kernza. So this has been a many years process. A few years ago, we were thinking, okay, what can we do with this as a brand? Cascading Farm was, and wanted to launch a cereal. It did not work very well at the time for a lot of reasons. One, there was a crop failure, so the actual grain didn't grow right. We couldn't harvest enough to make it commercialized at the time. And then we were able to collaborate with the Land Institute to do a limited edition launch. You guys may remember this. It was in a black box, and it cost $25. So not exactly mass market. But it was a really great opportunity to experiment with the product and to see how we could work with the farmers that are growing it in order to learn. Fast forward to this October, we were able to launch a limited edition, which you guys can see over there, General Mills commercial moment. And it's really exciting to me that we went through this process that was so hard, especially over the last year when this crop did succeed, even though there was a horrible drought in all of North America. Wheat was down 50%. That's huge. So the fact that Kernza, with its deep roots, was able to be resilient through that drought, and that the farmers that we work with in Minnesota were able to make it through that very challenging climactic event, and then we're able to then get it into this box that you're seeing here today. And the great news is that we had enough that it's now not going to be limited edition. It will be,
And
is this a
hopefully
secret?
not $25.
Hopefully not $25. So that just is a really special example for me about how purpose and innovation can be connected, and that the farmers and the scientists that we're able to work with could help make this happen.
I think that's great, Margot, and I do think too, Whole Foods was a critical partner with us as part of that, right? The retailer saying, we're gonna sign up to be on this long-term journey with you. We did an exclusive launch with Whole Foods, and so I think that's also been a really important part of the journey. Love that example. And then Nate, you talked about this in the beginning, but the Annie's Regenerative Mac and Cheese journey that we've been on together, can you talk a little bit about that and what that was like from the grower side? Like Margot highlighted, the grower side is so important and is critical and fundamental to everything we do.
Yeah, well, it seems like everybody loves mac and cheese, so it's a fun product to work on since it's such a popular food. But when you make mac and cheese, mostly you just make it with durum wheat, and durum wheat, as probably most folks know, is a nitrogen feeder. It pulls from the soil and it takes from the soil, and it's got a pretty, it taxes the soil quite a bit. So when we were thinking about what makes a farmer whole, how do you actually have this system that you can have a complete crop rotation? Annie's asked this question to farmers. They said, what crop do you need to grow that then can feed that durum wheat and make it so that you have a complete cycle? And we said yellow peas, because yellow peas are very similar grain crop. We can use the same equipment. They grow well in our region. And ultimately, they have a very workable flavor profile, and they are light in color. They don't throw off any consumer with what they look like or what they taste like. In doing that, we realized that yellow peas fix enough nitrogen to really feed that wheat crop and to break up that cycle and to give us an outlet to sell something that makes our rotation whole. And so when they launched the regenerative mac and cheese, we had this really fun opportunity just to sit back and realize that we have our fertilizer taken care of, and we get paid to grow our own fertilizer. We have our wheat taken care of because we're really good at growing wheat in Montana. And there's now this delicious food product that everyone can realize a higher protein content in the mac and cheese. So really, everybody won. The planet, the farmer, the consumer, the business. Everybody got something out of this innovation where we thought about how do we just do this a little bit better. It's a little bit risky, but it's ultimately looking at what makes everyone whole.
And Nate, as part of that process, were there challenges that were met along the
Oh
way?
boy. Well, it's real. I was always blown away that General Mills was willing to work directly with farmers. They've got incredible scale. They're set up to work at a really big scale and only work with a minimum amount of product. And so when we come with a SKU like this regenerative mac and cheese, setting up the supply chain was a bit of an innovation in and of itself. The same machinery that makes the existing mac and cheese doesn't really apply when you're doing a single truckload of yellow peas or a single truckload of durum wheat. And so the innovation team at Annie's was calling us farmers up being like, do you have any milling partners that you want to try out with us? And do they, meet the food safety standards? But otherwise, let's give them a go. And so a lot of millers in Montana got the chance to become part of the supply chain. It wasn't just trying to fit the mold that already existed, but it was innovating at every level. And I think that was something that really excited the entire organic community in Montana, was that everybody got to play a little bit of a role. The seed cleaner, the folks cracking the peas, the folks ultimately milling the peas. Everybody got to figure out how can we contribute to this question that brings a really great product to market and gets to work with someone who can scale it, because ultimately there's a lot of farmers who would love to sell durum wheat and organic yellow peas into this product.
And Nate, do you have any advice if there are other partners out there who are interested in partnering directly with growers like yourself? Like, what would be the advice that you would give them?
Talk to those farmers. Ask them first, what do they need to make this work? I think a lot of companies come up with a really catchy product, a really catchy crop that they think is going to sell really well, or they've done some test groups that say that this is something consumers are interested, and it might be really tricky to grow, as opposed to asking those farmers, what makes the ecology of your farm work best? And how do we then introduce those products into our ideal formulation? And so I think farmers know a lot. Farmers know a lot about supply chain, even though we're not necessarily at the forefront or right, in the discussion all the time with how to make this happen. But a lot of farmers have some really great ideas about how we can help get these products to market. Because when there's a demand and a market, we know we have a place to go with our crops.
Love that. Laura, I'm going to come back to you. I have a question of, and I'm sure people in the audience have this question too. If you could give entrepreneurs in the audience advice, because I know we have some entrepreneurs in the audience, on how to continue to grow your brand without kind of losing the soul and its purpose, what would you say?
Well, I've been working with General Mills for quite a while now, and I've watched it evolve, and each team that comes in has, their own ideas about how to continue to evolve the brand. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But, as a founder, in order to innovate, you have to try things. Not everything's going to work, but in order to evolve, you have to try things. But the key is to remember really what your roots are about, what's important to you, like what your brand architecture is about, which is like, really, who are you at the core? I remember when, I was growing my brand and I would get feedback. I listened to every bit of feedback, good and bad. And I think it was like year 3 of Larabar, and people are like, how come you're not this? Why don't you become this? Why? I even got somebody that called and said, well, are you going to make a nut-free bar? And I was like, no, we are not nut-free. It was like, everybody wanted us to be everything all at once for them, which is a wonderful thing when people are asking you to fulfill a need that you didn't even think about. For instance, I wasn't really, gluten-free at the time wasn't such a big thing. It was starting to emerge barely. And I was like, oh, we're a gluten-free product, We weren't kosher at first. All these people would come to us, and But there came a point when I had to say to myself, who are we really? What are we about? We're about simplicity, real food, and a wonderful experience with this product. And everything that we do in our marketing, whether we're cutting up samples in person or giving them out or we're talking to people or what have you, everything is going to reflect that value of simplicity and all of that in everything that we do. So it's really, really important to keep a pulse on that. And that's a lot of the reason that I continue to work with the brand is I'm kind of like the archive and the person that says, hey, the reason we chose these colors is because they look healthful and vibrant and not artificial, because we're not an artificial product. I mean, little tiny nuances really make a difference, especially in natural and organic, because that's why, we love them, because all the little things matter to us. So important to keep your pulse on.
I love that you're the historian and that you keep that all straight for us. Follow-up question to that would just be about people. So you talked about this. I think everybody's talked about this. Like at the heart of what we do with our Nat.org brands is also about the passion that people have. So as Lara, you've seen people come into the brand over the years. Like, what have you looked for in terms of people that you really feel like will help propel the Larabar brand forward?
I feel like this realm of the food business, natural and organic, is a lot about passion and true passion. I mean, I started Larabar because I was passionate, not because I knew anything. I had to learn all those things. I wasn't a food scientist. I wasn't an expert in sourcing almonds. I had no clue about manufacturing. I had to learn. But when you have passion, it makes a difference. And then the teams that have followed and all the people that have come into the brand have said, this is such an exciting experience because there's such a larger purpose than ourselves. And to have that passion and excitement behind a brand really propels you forward. It's like an energy. You're building on that energy. And so it's really, really important to make sure that people understand how, why, what you're about, and to keep getting you excited about it. I mean, whenever I talk about Larabar, people always say to me, God, you're so passionate. And I'm like, this is years later, but I love this brand. I love what it's about. I love that people enjoy it for a lot of different reasons, and I'm really proud of it. So, it's important to keep that going.
Absolutely, and your name is on the bar too. Very important. Speaking of people, Sid, you talked about reaching new consumers. And one of the things that we talk about and has come to light within the Nat.org food industry, even more so, I would say, in the last few years, is that, total food and bev sales so much outpace still, are so much bigger than Nat.org food sales. I think Nat.org food sales is still only about 8% of total food and bev. And when we look at the consumers we reach, we're still predominantly white, not necessarily reaching multicultural consumers. And then the industry doesn't necessarily also reflect the rest of the population in the US. As you think about reaching multicultural consumers, and I know this is near and dear to both of our hearts, how have you thought about it while still staying authentic to the Larabar and Epic brands?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's part of why I wanted to join the food industry was to tackle a question like that, because it's complex, it's not easy. But I'll just first pause and say, it's actually been really fun to be at Expo this year because it's felt a little different. I feel I've met so many more BIPOC founders. There's so many sessions we've had addressing this topic, and I would say it starts with role modeling. I think a lot of us get inspired to careers when we see people doing it that look like us, or we feel included. And I feel like I'm just inspired at how many people have been at this show that are changing the face of food. And so, part of why I decided to join CPG, I went to different companies, but one of the first people I met from General Mills was PZ, actually, Priscilla. And I'm like, she looks different from what I expected. And so did the team. Ibrahim Basir, who's a former General Mills marketer. He recently founded A Dozen Cousins. He was the second person I met. And so that had an impact on me. And part of how we change food is we bring in diversity to our companies. And that takes courageous founders to show us that these are careers we can do. And so I will start there and say that, until we have leaders and decision makers that notice when we're not being inclusive, right? It doesn't come naturally to us. Just like I love having women on my team. The Larabar associate manager who's in the room, she's a woman. And I think that matters because there's things that diversity shows that you only know if that's you. And so taking it forward to our brands, one thing I'm proud about is, because I felt this myself, you don't feel connected to a brand even if you want to buy it, you're like, I feel uncomfortable. Like, does that brand okay if I buy it? Like, could I be associated with it? Like, do they think I'm cool enough to be with that brand? And a lot of times your content, like what images are you putting out in the world? Are you showing a diversity of people in your content? That matters a lot, right? Because that shows people that I could buy this brand too. They care about me. And so I've just been really proud at how inclusive our content has been. We get the opportunity to work with influencers, how we've chosen a diversity of influencers to partner with. One thing I've learned at Expo, I've known it to be true, is that multicultural households, they're willing to pay a premium for good food too. Like, I think there's a fallacy that we don't care about the quality of food, but we also need people to show it, and kind of model that behavior. And so I've loved that journey that we're on. I think the future is innovation for this consumer target. And so I'm really hopeful for the potential, but I think it really starts with just being inclusive. And so that's been a journey, but I'm excited about where we're headed.
Love that, Sid. And Sid said I didn't look like other people, and he didn't mention I'm 100% Chinese, born in Brazil, and grew up in Minnesota. So if you know any other Chinese, Minnesota, Brazilians, please send them my way. But yeah, Sid, I think that is so important. And I think Lara and Sid, you guys hit on it. Passion and inclusivity, I think, are super important. And it was interesting, even this morning, Perry, one of our team members in the audience, got a chance to meet Lara and said, the reason I joined and said I wanted to join General Mills Natural Organic Brands was because I listened to your How I Built This podcast. So it's pretty amazing how we can inspire others. Well, I took a lot away from the panel. Before we wrap it up, I would just love to open it up for questions from the audience, if anyone has anything that they would like to ask to these amazing panelists.
I feel like I could do it without the microphone. I'm pretty loud. I'm Nikki. Thank you guys so much. When there are other brands, especially like if we look at all the brands that are here, so many of them are trying to do the same thing and are very similar. Outside of the potential deduction of your sales because it's a competitive brand but is trying to do something similar, is there a sense of welcomeness because you're trying to do the same thing? I'm sure for you guys it's the more the better, but how do you tackle that, the difference between, or how do you balance between competitiveness but also okay, great, hurrah, we were, stage A and now you're stage B, welcome to the crew, we're all trying to do the same thing?
I feel like I have a good example for this, which has to do with Larabar, actually. So over the past 2 years, we've been looking at almonds, which are a really important original ingredient for cherry pie and some of the other delicious flavors. Almonds are mostly all grown in California. About 80% of the whole world supply is grown here. It's totally scorched earth, conventional, very extreme example of approaching farming, and it is very much not friendly to the ecosystem. So we've been looking, as Larabar, seeking through our purpose to empower and think about real food. How does that take place in the way that food is grown? And then also, Larabar is not the only almond buyer, obviously, and everybody who buys almonds is kind of in this boat together. So we've been We've been funding a study through a nonprofit called the Ecdysis Foundation that looks at what does it take to grow almonds regeneratively. So when you enter the orchard, it's like a beautiful place where there's birds and you can hear the bees buzzing and it smells good and you feel like you're in Pennsylvania because it's so much more lush than the Mad Max down the road that's like really dusty. But we cannot do that by ourselves. So there's plenty of other awesome brands like Patagonia Provisions, Philosopher Foods, and others that are also in the mix here trying to understand how we can grow almonds regeneratively, what the outcomes for soil health and water and like making farmers whole look like. The more the better, because we all need those almonds, and if we can't figure out how to grow them in a way that will keep them on the map for many years to come, then none of us will be able to have that ingredient. So it's definitely challenging, but each brand can come to it with their own little kind of take, and that will look different for Larabar versus the others. But in the end, we all really need this to happen. So the more the merrier, like you said.
And I'll just add a really quick one. If you look at pork rinds, that category, it only has 20% household penetration, whereas jerky has maybe 50%. And so, although we have competitors, if we can collectively grow awareness of this category, like people think a pork rind a certain way, just because maybe that's how we experienced it growing up, but there are really quality, well-made product out there. And so we've been excited to partner with other brands and our manufacturers that co-pack a lot of different brands and just elevate the product, the category, right? And I think at Expo West, I'm sure that's happened to a lot of natural foods brands. And so it's not easy. Maybe you're not always partnering, right, when you're fighting for distribution, but I think growing category awareness and the benefits is a great way for you to collectively partner to grow brands.
I love that. It's a great question on just how you balance competition and collaboration. And I do think there are certain goals that we've talked about that I think we all want to collectively get after as an industry. And there's power in those numbers. So great question. Feel free. You know what, I can start, Sid just called on me. I like that. It's a great question. I would say we've learned so much from Annie's because Annie's really, wow, what an incredible journey. And we actually, similar to Lara, we stay really in close contact with Annie as well, and obviously John. And that journey of growing that brand to what it is today, over $500 million in sales, has come with so many lessons learned and a lot of passion along the way. But really growing that brand and understanding what categories to go in, how to grow that household penetration like Sid was talking about, and then taking that learning and applying it to the different brands within our portfolio that are maybe a little bit younger in the journey, right? Our Annie's Mac and Cheese, it's an incredible brand. The last 3 years, we've grown 48% on that business, and it's been around for 30 plus years, which is pretty incredible. And so really thinking about how do we reach more consumers, and then honestly, there's some cross-purchase opportunities too between our brands as well, because a lot of them are being consumed across the board. And so another example that I'll give as well is e-commerce sales for Annie's Mac and Cheese. We have 20% of our purchases already online. Our Cascadian Farm brand is actually only 11% today. So we're trying to think through, and our teams are sharing best practices between what are we doing on Annie's that could really be applicable to what we do on Cascadian Farm and vice versa. So a lot of synergies there.
I'm willing to wrap you.
Consumption a bad thing? How do you navigate that
It's a great question, and I think this is just my belief. I think at the core, both plant-based meats and consciously sourced meat brands, we're trying to help create more climate positive impact on the planet, you know? And so I think for Epic, for example, we also don't like how a lot of animal management is done and conventional meat forward brands because, you know, and Margot can speak to this, it's not done in a way that is helping the climate. But I think, you know, unfortunately, right, and this goes to the question earlier, when there's competition, I think people take strong stands. But what I like to see in our industry is when, you know, the original intent of both plant-based meat and brands like Epic are, how can we do this a better way for the planet? And, you know, I think there's some people that prefer plant-based diets for very great reasons, and people that prefer, that either are on animal-based diets or, you know, a hybrid of that diet. And I think they both choose those diets for very deep and meaningful reasons. And I think what's great about both businesses is I think, you know, if you can really embrace the intent, I think there should be room for both, right? And I hope that's where the industry involves is how do we collaborate to be part of the solution? Because I don't think the solution should be that one diet should be the same for everyone. So that's my personal belief, but I get excited when I see people trying to solve difficult problems, and I hope there's room for different ways of solving that problem.
Love that. Maybe we have time for one more question.
My question is about sustainable packaging. Has General Mills done anything incredibly innovative over the last few years? Have you done any R&D to see some of these iconic brands move in the right direction?
I can take this one since I also lead our global packaging ambition. We are working on it. General Mills has a very challenging packaging situation because a lot of our stuff that isn't recyclable yet is in film. So that's the case for a lot of these plastic films are used for bars. It's really important for food safety to maintain our shelf life and the nutrition content, but it's also challenging from a sustainability perspective. There's not a lot of good options for people for recycling, and there's not a lot of availability of affordable, basically the affordable technology that we can use for those things. But we have done some really cool stuff like Annie's, for example, and Cascadian Farm both use in their cereal liner bags 35% post-consumer recycled content, which is was totally unheard of when it came out in 2019, and we won an award from the Sustainable Packaging Coalition for trying that out. We've also experimented with paper-based packaging for our microwavable Annie's mac and cheese cups, which is compostable or recyclable, so you can take your pick depending on excuse me, what you have available. But that's definitely a challenge, and it's a frontier that we're working on. And I hope that we'll be able to share more news about that in the coming months because we have some experiments coming out so stay tuned.
It's a great question, and there are a couple of technical team members in the audience from General Mills that I will say are working really hard to make it possible, and we're really proud, again, in a lot of these brands to really chart the course. And like on Annie's, for instance, 90% of our packaging plus is already recyclable by design. So we're really proud of that. But like Margot was saying, it is quite a journey to get there, but it's one that we're really committed to. So,
and we're also proud that most of our cardboard has already been recycled up to 6 times by the time it gets into our packaging. So keeping those trees in the forest.
Love that. So as you guys can see, I'll just wrap it up by saying huge thank you to being here. And if you guys don't mind just giving a round of applause to our panelists who have been, we tried to get the spotlight taken away, but that was not possible. So we've been blinded by the lights up here. But really, really thankful to have all of the panelists here. And really, I think you guys what I took away is just passion is at the heart of purpose. And oftentimes, you're lucky enough to get a founder or someone really passionate to work on these brands, but everyone from the growers to the founders to people who inherit these brands and really care about them. So I'm appreciative of everybody in this room, and we're happy to stay for a few minutes after, in case anyone has any other questions and wants to connect. But thank you guys for all joining us today. Really appreciate it.